and even more broadly, why do they use drugs? Why do they use substances? What do you think it
being affected by this dysfunctional relationship? Because there's nothing we can do. We're not the cause of that, any of that.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Narcissism Unmasked. And today I have such an amazing person and a good friend of mine, and somebody who actually I duetted and it blew up on my YouTube channel specifically about Starbucks, which is a whole separate topic. But I want to talk to you today about substance abuse. But can you first introduce yourself? Tell us who you are.
Hi. So I'm really happy to be here. My name is Ro, short for Rosanna Faye, and I am Rollercoaster of Love. So you'll find me on all the platforms talking about healing after narcissistic abuse, talking about thriving after, and specifically steps to stay narc free. So meaning staying away from toxic people. Happy to be here.
And that's the goal.
Yeah, that is the goal. Stay narc free, which is
Right?
funny
That's
to
the
talk about this topic because I mean, I wear some narc free merch and I have like a narc free brand, and a lot of people think it means something else when it means narcissist, but yeah.
Which is ironic considering the topic today.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I'm just thinking that.
Yeah. And so this is the thing, I think I've talked to so many different clients in my capacity as a coach and a survivor, hearing constantly about addictions. And I know a lot of people who talk about coke addictions, and
Yeah.
that may not be their only addiction, right? I know many, many things they can be addicted to, but this seems to be a really big one.
Mhm.
And I want to talk to you about why you think narcissistic people use cocaine specifically, and even more broadly. Why do they use drugs? Why do they use substances? What do you think it is?
I think a lot of it, so for me, I've done a lot of content. I've made a lot of skits and talked a little bit about this just because it was my own personal experience being with somebody for 14 years who was a cocaine addict, probably still is. I mean, I'm not sure. No contact, right? Narc free. So I don't know what his life is like now, but when I was very heavily involved in it, I saw the addiction really take over. And I think specifically this drug, because it's bougie, right? It's like very accepted. It's kind of like one of those things that if you can manage it, it's like a fun thing to do for people on the weekend, and it's somewhat acceptable as whatever illegal drugs go. But when I started making content, a lot of my followers were going, yeah, that's my ex, or how come they're all addicted? Like, what is this? And so it became a thing that people, it wasn't just me. So, having this kind of awareness that a lot of people experience it, that's when I started to dig. Why do you think like there has to be something with this type of abuse and this type of dysfunctional relationship and their relationship to this specific drug? And I think it comes down to connection, because I don't know if you've ever heard of this this theory of rat park. Have you ever heard of this? My ex used to bring it up all the time. So I'm not sure, don't quote me on where this study comes from. But they put two rats or one rat in a box, right? And they put them in a box with two water. One water is just clear and the other water has cocaine in it. Now, with nothing in that box, the rat would always go to the cocaine water until it just died. So then they took this rat and they put it in another box with other rats and other things to play with, and like rat park, call it rat park. And then the water and the cocaine water was never drank. So they only drank the fresh water. And my ex used to bring this story up all the time, that like the key to addiction, the cure for it is connection. So if you're connected, you have a good community, you have things to do, you have the solid form of play, you have this, you feel this close connection, then you don't need this drug, because the drug is what connects you. Like it soothes that part that's so disconnected. So he would bring that up all the time. I think it was an excuse to try to coerce me into intimacy and things like that. But you know what I mean?
I was
right?
just going to say, like, what's the connection? Like, what's the desired connection for him? Yeah.
Well, he'd say, "Oh, Ro, I'm missing connection. Like, you know about Rat Park, right?" Like, he would tell me about this study and he'd reference it all the time. And there's been TED Talks about Rat Park. But I thought about it after the fact, like after separation and divorce. And I thought about, like, what is that? What is that? Like, how does it connect? And because narcissistic people are so disconnected, like they lack empathy, they lack this sort of being able to like feel. I mean, I can't speak for their feelings, but to feel close with someone, to be vulnerable, like that's intimacy, to really be vulnerable with someone, to trust and feel connected, where you feel like you're seeing each other. They don't have the ability to do that. So they lack connection. Like
Yeah, they really do.
fake. And so I think they connect a lot with a drug that keeps them completely disconnected.
Hmm. I know there's a real like fear of being vulnerable with them. They don't, I think, I've heard it put before that if they feel like you can see them really, that you wouldn't love them, you wouldn't like them, and that you would reject them. So they keep people at arm's length. They also want people around them. So they use control instead of connection, which
Mhm.
is awful for the people that are stuck in these relationships. Something that's kind of interesting, when I made a video about narcissists and narcissistic people and the connection to substance abuse, so many of the comments were like, well, I guess I'm a narcissist, making this sort of, well,
Oh yeah.
frankly, a logical fallacy that
Yeah.
cocaine users are narcissists, when that's not what we're saying. Many narcissists are cocaine users. It's not, the reverse doesn't need to be true, right?
Yeah.
But there is research that actually shows that people with narcissistic personality disorder and people with the traits, or strong levels of the traits, are more likely to engage in substance abuse. That includes like alcohol and drugs, but that's compared to the general population. They escape from reality, which is very common, right? They're escaping from feelings of inadequacy,
Mhm.
and really to kind of maintain that grandiose
Yes.
self-image, right? That like larger than life energy that I'm told you get from cocaine. And it's also very impulsive. That
It's
like
risky too.
addictive, obviously, but they're so impulsive, and it kind of like, oh, I'm just going to do this, and they don't really think about what this means. But I think it's a coping mechanism for them for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it speeds up the process too. So everything is a little bit faster. The one thing I used to notice was like robo mode. I would notice, and that's what I would call it out as, is like, oh, you're in robo mode right now. Whereas he wouldn't be able to just sit and just be still with the moment, just be still with uncertainty, just be still and feel an emotion. He'd be like, this emotion doesn't belong to me. You can have it. But if he did, some blow, he would be all over the place, robo mode, and he'd run around and get this done, that done, all of this. And he's not thinking. And like what you said about impulse behavior, it's really impulsive and risky to do that, but you don't have time to think about the consequences. You don't have time to think about, how is this going to affect me later? How is this going to affect the people I love? What about this? I'll just take $1,000 and spend it on the casino. I'll just do this. I'll just do that. And I don't have to think right now because I'm in robo mode. Like, this drug has given me this power and I don't have to think about consequences. And I think that's really what's going on in the mind of a person that's using, because they don't have to cognitively think about what's set for the future. Like, how is this going to affect the people in my life and me? And they don't face consequences. They're also entitled too. So it's like, I get to just be this way. And I haven't,
Yeah,
I can use it as an excuse.
I don't have to think about anybody else. Now, there's something interesting. I see this pattern,
Mhm.
one or the other, and I think you and I have a different experience with this. In my abusive relationship, I don't know if it was so specific to coke. For me, not for me to be clear, but in the relationship, it was actually a multitude of drugs. There was always some substance. Coke was a little bit sprinkled throughout it, no pun intended, and other drugs as well, but it was always something. But he never had a problem, right? It was absolutely never an addiction, never a problem. In fact, it was really just put back at me like, you're a party pooper and you're just stiff and you just don't know how to have fun. And normal people are doing this. And I'm
Right.
not trying to imply that people who are not normal are the ones that are doing it, but the ones that are using it to cope with life, to regulate, just constantly looking for the next high, the next drug, can't live in reality, I
Mhm.
would argue there is a problem. And the fact is, it's affecting your partner, it's affecting your family, it's affecting your life. To just say that it isn't means
Mhm.
nothing, right? It is affecting us as I am saying it, and I'm the one affected by it. So it was just an outright denial that it was a problem. I believe that even later in the relationship, when I decided that no matter what he's saying, it is a problem, that was a big issue for me to adopt that belief that he has a problem and that I need to help him, or that you can't leave someone who has a problem because that's not right. You're abandoning them and they need you. But there are some who will deny it. There are some narcissists who will admit it, but I don't think they're admitting it genuinely, right? It's like, oh, but I have a problem, so you can't leave me. I think that's the kind of the concept. What was your experience in realizing it's a problem? What did you tell yourself? Did it make you stay?
Yeah, well, you touched on something really important, which is the accountability piece. So if they would hold themselves accountable to all of it, like every little thing they've done to us, right? We're in an abusive relationship for, we call it an abusive relationship for a reason. There's abuse, not just substance abuse, because that's their relationship with the substance. That's their own addiction. And a lot of us are with addicts. A lot of us are in relationships with people who are in recovery or who are suffering from addiction issues, and they're not narcissistic people. They're loving, kind people with an abuse problem. That's their relationship, but we call it an abusive relationship because there's all sorts of other things that are happening. So I think the key thing here is like collapsing it into one problem. And that was my issue, is his problem was also my problem. It wasn't, you were abusing me and cheating on me and treating me like this and that, giving me the silent treatment, lying to me, like stealing from me, like, gaslighting me into making me feel crazy all the time, where I literally was on antidepressants for years because I had to deal with him. Like that kind of stuff has nothing to do with being a coke addict. Like that has everything to do with his personality. But what we
Mm.
do as victims, as survivors, is we collapse it into one problem and make it, and they're really good at selling it to us that way too. They would say, well, would you leave someone with cancer? I don't know if you've heard that before.
Yes. Oh
And
my God, I hear that all the time.
I'm
Why is it always cancer? But yeah,
like,
if I had cancer, would you leave? What happened to in sickness and in health? What? And they use vows, they use promises. You're
everything.
abandoning me, just like everybody else.
Just like everyone else, I can't rely on you. I can't rely on anyone, right? The only thing I can rely on is this drug. And so like my drug's not going to leave me. But what about our bankruptcy? What about you're leaving smears on the kids' iPads? What about like you're out for weeks and you don't come home? What about the credit card statements? Like what about all of that? And yet this is what's funny, because we just talked about this at the beginning of this discussion, is I can't get Starbucks, that's $5, but you just spent $500 in the last 2 hours. What? Like, how does that make sense, right? And so because cancer is giving you this, like because you have a disease. So the thing with recovery and these programs like NA, AA, GA, which my ex went to all of those, gambling addicts, Narcotics Anonymous, and alcohol. So they would talk a little bit about how it's a disease of the mind and a condition of the body. So your mind is the one that's compulsive. Your mind is constantly thinking about it. And he would explain to me how much he would suffer sitting at the liquor store for hours, like in front of the door of the liquor store, just being like, do I go in? Do I not go in? And how much mental anguish that was for him. Like just to be able to, I don't know, I have to go down that road. And that's the disease of the mind. So I felt so bad that he had to go through that all the time. I felt so bad that it was akin to cancer, that all of whatever he did was okay, not okay, but curable, like something we can fix, like something that we could, there's hope, because they teach you
Yeah. And
that you have hope.
and you keep saying
We,
that, and it's so true. The way that they convince you that it's like us against the problem. And I
Mhm.
find that, even if you look at like he cheated, well, it's us against the problem of he was cheating on you, but we have to fix it. We have to fix his addiction. We have to fix his insecurity, his abandonment issue, his rejection issues. It's always a we. And that the use of that word is so powerful when you're in this relationship. And then you get like sucked in to
If
the
it's we,
concept of us against the world, us
who's
against the
accountable though?
addiction.
If it's we, is it you accountable? Is it Lisa is accountable halfway to 50% accountability falls on you when you've never even touched the drug? How does that
Yeah.
make sense? That makes zero sense because that's what they evade. When they say we and it's a problem, the accountability falls on us and the addiction and the
Mm-hmm.
substance. So where do they go in accountability? Where do they, oh, I have a disease. Like this, what do you mean accountability? Oh, I cheated on you. Well, that's the
Yeah.
disease, you know? So I did have a huge struggle leaving because of that. Like that was brought up a lot. That was brought up with promises. That was brought up with, okay, I'll go to more meetings. Like, yes, I'll get help. Like I'll go to rehab. Like we'll do this. We'll start saving money. Like we'll fix this big hole in our bank account that I left from this addiction that it took from us. The addiction took from us. Yeah, I hired, you know, escorts and I wasted all this money on all of this stuff, but that was the addiction that did that to us.
Wasn't me.
Wasn't
Yeah. Like
me.
it's some external source. And again, it builds this narrative that they can deflect the responsibility of the choices that they made, blame you a little bit, possibly, or even if they're not directly blaming you, but certainly make you feel responsible for their actions, their behaviors, their emotions. All of this stuff mixes in so much and is really a huge cause of how trauma bonds get created, right? Because you
Yeah.
feel responsible for them. Now you can't leave because they're addicted. And if they were starting to get better and you leave, what does he have?
Mhm.
Oh, what can he do? Lines, right?
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
always, and then you're the cause of it, right? He was getting better, but if you leave, then
Then
he
he's
can't
back
be held responsible.
again.
He's going to have no choice. He's going to have no choice. It puts it on you. So you're responsible for his actions. And if he does it when he's supposed to not be doing it, let's say he claims he's getting better, that argument we got into yesterday, that's the reason. It's because you were nagging me. It's because you asked me to take the garbage out rudely. I didn't like your tone. You
Mhm.
know, I don't know. I don't, and they just all the excuses. Like I can hear a million excuses, from my own experience and also from all the clients that I've spoken to that share this problem. But tell me this concept of we that we're talking about, whether it's you or even your clients, because I know you work as a coach as well.
Yeah.
How do you see this affect the victims and survivors that do kind of buy into that we and that they stay? I hate to call it excuses, right? I feel like I need a better word, but like, what are I made excuses. I guess I'm talking about myself in some ways, but like, what are the excuses that we make that justify staying because of a substance problem, whether they admit it or not?
You know, a lot of clients that suffer this, that have these kind of situations similar to my situation, it's the empathy that we have. You know, as a survivor, we have that we carry almost all of the empathy in that relationship. So when we're looking at them, like how I would look at him as like a wounded little puppy that needs my help. And because we're healers, like a lot of us want to do this. Like we want to heal other people in a way to heal ourselves because we were really broken in these relationships. So if you look back, you probably wanted to heal a part of that person. Like you probably wanted to heal a part of him that seemed wounded, that seemed like, oh, well, connection is all they needed. I can give that to them. They just need the love of a good woman to fight them through this addiction. And we feel bad. We feel for them because they don't have that ability to feel for themselves. Like they don't have to look in the mirror and to really look at yourself like that is very, really painful, I'm sure. From
Hmm.
recovering from a trauma bond, you know, like how painful is that to like really look at those parts of us and go, oh, right? But narcissists can't do that. They don't want to look at those parts. So they shine them onto you. So you have to look at their parts. And so staying is like the opposite would be abandoning. The opposite would be, well, I'm the cause of now what happens to them if I don't stay. Everything they say and do. And I've heard it all. Like one of the top ones is like, you know, they'll off themselves. okay, I need you in my life or else I'm going to unalive myself. I'm going to, and then they have this on their guilty conscience, even though half the time more than half the time, that's not going to happen. They wouldn't be saying that if they're really suffering that way, mental illness. But they have this really good way of making us feel so responsible for it that whatever happens, like once we take our power back, we will have to feel guilty for the rest of our lives for doing that because of how they're going to end up. And the first time, I'll say this, the first time I left my ex, this was before we got married. We were together for 5 years and then I left him for a year and a half. He lost it. He was like, I need you. Like, you've ruined my life. And he drank himself into a car accident, rolled his car 9 times, almost died. And because he was under the influence in that accident, ended up in jail. And that I always took on as that was me. I did that. If I didn't leave him that first time, he wouldn't have driven into a ditch, So I still I know I don't carry that anymore, but for the almost 10 years that we were married, yeah, I carried that. So that ran through my mind too when I was leaving the second time was, remember what happened when I left the first time? Like, he will drive himself into a ditch. Now I know I'm not responsible for that. But this is where victims go, is they go into their mindset of like, whatever they said, whatever they threatened to do, however their life turns, all that abandonment that they've suffered in their childhood or whatever childhood trauma they are blaming the narcissism on, that's going to be now on me if I leave, if I take my power back and choose me. So I'm going to choose us because they've packaged it as, this is a problem, we're going to take care of it together. And
I need you.
I need you. And there's something about being needed too that they really know how to tap into that part of us to feel.
Yeah, they're so intuitive. People don't know that about narcissists. It's like they have no empathy, no feelings, they're monsters, but they are intuitive into your feelings, not so much their own, right? It's not the self-awareness piece, but they can pick that up and they know that like you don't want to be abandoned. So if they keep talking about them being abandoned, it's going to trigger something in you that will make you want to stay. And I think people forget that a lot of this is like subtle conditioning over time and the grooming over time. You don't just meet them and suddenly you're responsible for them. Over time, you feel that way. So it's really hard to differentiate the problem, his problem, from us and our relationship. You want it to work so badly. Now, tell me this, because I see this probably the most common is he's only abusive when he's high. He's only abusive when he's drunk. So how does that concept facilitate staying as well, and that belief that like we can solve this problem?
Yeah. I think back to so my ex was sober and didn't touch any of it for 9 months. And this didn't correlate with a pregnancy or anything like that. It was just, he just chose 9 months and he was sober and clean for 9 months. Now, I don't know how much of that is true because he could have hid that, but these were the chips that he collected at the meetings and all of this. But during that 9 months, yes, he was different. He wasn't as abusive, but he was grumpier because they have to actually face themselves. So I do have lots of clients saying, well, when they're not drinking, they're actually not like this. And when they're like this, do they act out and do they don't suffer the consequences. So they will go out and cheat and they're entitled and they're this and that. But when they're sober, as in like when they have a sobering morning, like for the day and then back out at night, spending more money. So like, what does 24 hours cancel out the last week of shit? You know what I mean? Like, so if somebody is clean and sober, right, and that's your baseline for what that is, if that's healthier, take a look at that part because that's a hard part for a lot of people that I've talked to, and me included. That's a really hard part because they have to face their feelings. They don't have the drug to escape to. They don't have, me actually, when I look back at it, I'm like, I would rather you be out till 3, 4 a.m. because then I don't have to deal with this. Like they're angry, they're angrier, they're meaner. They're the sobering dry drunk that they call it. They actually are facing those feelings and they don't have a coping mechanism. They don't have some kind of strategy to stay like this. They're like this. And that's a lot for us to manage, especially if we've taken that role on, which a lot of us do.
Yeah, which we did, because we all do. I've rarely met someone who's not felt totally responsible for somebody else's choices.
Yeah.
Somehow it's always, you made me do it and all that. Now, I think it was in Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. I could be wrong about my source, but it was a credible source, that a lot of these abusive types, now he's not talking about narcissists in his book, he's talking about a generic abusive man specifically.
Angry
He
men.
talks about how they use substances to be abusive. And it's actually really interesting, because people think like, oh, you are who you are, or you would, if you aren't drunk, you wouldn't do drunk what you wouldn't do sober. May or may not be true, debatable. I've heard people battle that out, and I don't think I know enough. But abusers will often get drunk to abuse you so that they can say, I was drunk. It becomes this way to just throw up their hands at, like, I'm not responsible when I'm drunk, but you can't be mad at me because I was intoxicated, whatever. And to be fair, it's interesting, in my own assault, he was so drunk. He describes himself as blackout drunk, knows it unequivocally that he didn't do what I claim he did. He remembers exactly. He was so blackout drunk, was his words, not mine. He vividly remembers that all he did was just push me off of him because I was attacking him, which is in no way what actually happened, of course. But I remember him sort of admitting that there was an altercation and that it had nothing to do with him being drunk. And it reminded me of all the times that other people have said that, oh, it's only when he's drunk, or it's because he's drunk. Sometimes they'll even admit, yeah, it's when I'm drinking. My question is always slightly rhetorical, but if they're doing it when they're drunk, let's say, and he himself is saying, I only do it when I'm drunk, you can't blame me. Have you considered not getting drunk? You know what I mean? It seems like such an obvious next step. If you yourself are recognizing that the issues come from your own cocaine addiction, drunken episodes, even if you won't acknowledge it's an addiction, but you can acknowledge the behavior stems from that usage, why wouldn't you stop it? I think at the end of the day, we need to really recognize that this is a choice.
Yes.
I'm not saying that alcoholism or drug addiction is a choice. I think when you're addicted, you're addicted. I don't know if a lot of these guys that we're talking about are true addicts in that sense, where they actually have the disease. You can have coexisting conditions, but I wonder if in this case, on this topic, are they making it up? Are they just weaponizing, but I'm an addict, you can't hold me accountable, which for the record is not how AA, NA, or anything works. Accountability is in the steps.
Front row and center, right? That's what you come forward with your problems and say, this is me, I'm the problem, right? It's not the addiction, it's me, I'm the problem, right? So I think there's a combination of two things happening here. It is sometimes they're faking it, and maybe not so much faking it, but amplifying it, using it as an amplification to the truth, which is they have a problem. They're angry men, or they're angry people. They have narcissistic traits. They have, arrogance, entitlement, all of the traits of narcissism there, and they're using it to abuse you. And they're also weaponizing this because it is common. It is a community of people who are struggling. There are groups, and there's a big community in recovery. And so they're like, I mean, my ex would love these communities. He'd be in there because he'd feel like he's part of a little, he's like part of this special little group. And it's that special and unique feature too. Like they feel like they're part of this little in group that is, even though he wasn't ever really sober or clean when he was going there and he was lying, like they're not vulnerable the way these guys in recovery are. So a little bit of lying, a little bit of mostly just amplifying it. And also that whole, like, it's an excuse. I really want to abuse her. I really want to but a little bit of drink and a little bit of this, and I have more power and I can do it. And I don't have to really worry about the shame that might come with it, because it covers that up. Like all of that just covers it up. So they get to mask, and they get to,
and it's so perfect for them. It's a built-in excuse, all of it. It's wild though. I know a lot of people that struggle with that kind of concept of like, is it the addiction or is it him? Is it who he is? And I personally subscribe to that ideology that like, you're not going to just get drunk and assault your partner. You're not
No.
just going to get high on coke and go on some rampage, because if that were true, then anyone who does coke would be doing that. Anyone who's drunk would be doing that. Why you? There
Mhm.
has to be something inherent. And what we know about abuse is that it's a belief system. It's a mindset. You don't just like, I'm not going to go get drunk tomorrow and then go assault somebody. That's
Mhm.
just not how this works. But
Mhm.
that's what they claim. And it's easy to believe when you're experiencing cognitive dissonance and you feel like, but I love this person. And the truth in your situation might be that they're not abusive or less abusive when they're sober. And it starts to feed into that narrative that it's just that. And if you really take your marriage vows seriously and it's in sickness and in health, as an example, how does that feed into this need to stay, to fix? So I'm going to leave you with this question. What would you tell clients that are like, I don't know, Ro, is it like maybe it's the addiction? If we could get him sober, I think he could be better. I think he could go back to the guy that he was. How would you address that with somebody who's still trying to figure out like the source of the abuse or if it's abuse?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And I think what it comes down to is for a lot of us survivors, we forget us. We're just a prop in this life of abuse and dysfunctional relationship. We're just the couch. We're just there. And it's like the couch is watching everything that's going on. We're watching this mess take place. We're watching this tornado happen in our house. We're watching our abuser, either spinning or winning or disappeared or yelling at us or screaming. And we're just like watching this movie and we're just trying to make this movie happen our way, but we're just the couch. Like we don't even exist. So what I tell clients is remember you exist. This is about you. Are you an addict? Are you spending thousands of dollars a night? Are you the one that is yelling and screaming? Or are you just crying yourself to sleep at night? Are you just not eating and sleeping? Are you staring into space while all of your kids' toys are all over the floor? Are you on antidepressants? Are you not knowing what to say or lost your voice? Do you not wear any makeup? Do you not do your hair anymore? Do you know what your favorite color is? Who are you? Go back to you. Who cares what this narcissist is going through? That's not your life. This is his life or their life. This is that. The relationship is dysfunctional and you're a prop in it. So I would say to them, pull yourself out of this movie that you're watching and start focusing on what's happening to you and your body and your mind and your soul and how you love and how you empathize and the other aspects of your life that are being affected by this dysfunctional relationship, because there's nothing we can do. We're not the cause of that, any of that. Somewhere along the lines, we were taught that we were the cause, we could change it. Like there's some sort of responsibility that lies on us. And no, we actually lose ourselves. We're like a shell of a
Yeah.
human being. That's what I used to say. I'm a shell of myself. And so once I
Mm.
was able to pull myself out and go, this is not my story. Like this is that. And I'm going to leave it
Yeah.
over there and I'm going to focus on me and stop asking questions about them. And is this addiction this and that? Will it change if he stops doing this or if they stop, doing the drugs or if they get clean or any of that? Like none of that has to do with me. I'm not the one trying to get clean. I don't need to go to rehab. Focus on you. I think that's the biggest thing. If you put yourself first, then everything falls into place and the clarity, like the lens starts to disappear and the windows are blasted open and you can start to see. And I think when we're stuck in these relationships, we're so blind. We can't see anything. So you got to pull yourself out and see.
Yeah. Which is so unbelievably hard. Empathy without the obligation. You can feel bad that someone is going through something, even if it is a real addiction. Truly, I feel horrible for anybody that's going through that. And I don't say that lightly. It's awful. And it's also not my problem. And I
Yes.
know that sounds callous, right? Some people are like, wow, you would do that to your spouse, to your boyfriend, yeah, I sure would. If it's dragging me down. Now, the flip side is if they're really trying, which I don't think is what we're talking about, but someone who's not abusive, but experiencing an addiction, a disease that's not the topic, right? So I don't want people to get twisted in the comments, like we're attacking people who have addictions. We're talking about abusers who weaponize their addictions, who may or may not have an actual addiction. And I think that's important because that empathy that we might have for someone who's experiencing something is an appropriate response. That means you care. That means you're a good person. That says something wonderful about you. That doesn't mean you're obligated to stay. It doesn't mean you're obligated to help. And I think that it's interesting that they always pitch it and frame it as you're abandoning them. But in order to help them, you are required to abandon yourself. So,
Yes.
like you said, this is all about what about you? How can
Yeah.
you put yourself at the forefront of this? I think that's such amazing advice. I want people to like really take that. And I would love to hear from people in the comments. Like, what do you think? What would be something that would be helpful to you, or what questions do you have? But thank you so much, Ro, for being here today and talking about this topic. I know that you and I have too much in common when it comes to our
Yes.
experiences. But
Yeah. When you mentioned
substance
it, it
abuse,
was like, it hits close to home, but let's talk about it because we've got experience. Yes.
yeah, it hits too close to home for too many people, sadly. So
Yeah.
people will be able to find you at, your website. I'll link everything. I want people to follow you on this platform, on all platforms, and interact with you. And just as an aside, Ro and I are actually co-founders, two of three co-founders of a company called wellnessrecoveryretreats.com. And so we host retreats, Mexico, Florida, etc. And they're all healing retreats. They're geared specifically towards women. What do you want people to know about these retreats?
So there's a moment in our healing where it's so lonely. Doing this is really lonely. And I think when we get together, even just on content, and we watch videos like this, there's something that connects with somebody else telling their story, not just a professional who knows the stats. It's somebody who's lived it. And there's something about being in the presence of other women, other people like yourself who have lived experience of what you thought you were the only person in the whole world to experience. That's what you're going to get. And you get to see us. And we're on beaches and pools. And, it is the luxurious treatment, the spa treatment that the narcissistic person in your life never allowed you to have. But except you get to be with other women who experience it. It's almost like a nod, like, yeah, you've been through it too. Same. And now this is where we get to heal. This is where we get to shine. And all those missing pieces that put us in the basement. I used to call it like just being stuck in the basement, a shell of myself on the bottom floor. We get to pull ourselves up to the penthouse and be in this space where we're like, wow, we made it out. And I think to celebrate that with people who've lived it is really the best way to heal. So this is what we offer. We would love to see you at one of our retreats.
Yeah, can't wait. So again, thank you so much. And everybody follow Rollercoaster of Love on all platforms. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
That was such an amazing discussion with Rosanna Faye of Rollercoaster of Love. Please follow her across all platforms. Now, listen, if you're with someone, if you're coming out of a relationship or you're still in a relationship with someone where you think substance abuse might be the cause of abuse, I would love to book a coaching session with you and talk you through this, what the signs really look like, the mindset, the behaviors, what you can look out for, and really help you process this. So please go to strongerthanbefore.ca, click on book a session, and let's talk about it.
Stronger than